Did you get the book?
Not yet, I will. I will.
Good.
You won't do it for another though.
Don't make it personal.
Well,
Everyone's left because you come up. That's fine. I'll give them a minute. They're just grabbing bits.
I'll be coming for a reading then.
What?
Just going to get a book about the palm reading.
All right.
And the lifeline and stuff like that. Yeah.
Really nice.
Eh?
Oh, my secret's out here. I got on similar status and one of the diaries, and I must admit, it's been really invaluable because in the years gone by, I always had my diary on my computer, but more and more people ask me when I'm out about things, and so now I have it on both and on my computer and in my bag, basically, and yeah, it's been invaluable. So, yeah, they're really good quality books.
And that's when you forget to put it from the paper to the electronic. Oh, you're coming in. You going out, darling? Right. I'm back.
Are you planning a trip?
Yeah, it's very difficult to maintain personal relationships. You know, really upsetting. I think you have to take a step back.
Okay. So, we have our third speaker for the afternoon. The wonderful, very nervous Stephen Mayger.
Thank you very much. After the lovely talks this morning, we've been sort of listening to different viewpoints, but they're all coming from the same sort of movement, this spiritualist movement that we're all a part of. And listening to Jason talk about the Matrix, I always think that spiritualists took both pills. Because we're kind of living with both worlds and trying to maintain them. And, you know, the technology that we've got today distracts us as much as it fills us with excitement and interest. But specifically looking at spiritualism, it's about a two-way communication between us and our loved ones in the spirit world, and the spirit world in general. But typically we think of prayer and meditation as a one-way communication. You send your petitions to the God force, and then in meditation you receive this impressions. But spiritualism is more of a two-way communication between two minds, very distinctly. Prior to the modern spiritualist movement, people used mesmerism, hypnotism, and it's the only way in which it's going to turn a prince into a frog. Because and you think that was probably pulled off by some very brave witch who managed to convince the prince that he was a frog and told his friends and family he should leave him like that until they paid her or left her alone. I imagine that's where it came from. But mesmerism was used by all the early mediums because it would put you into, and I'm going to try and get the word in one go, a somnambistic state or something. I think that was it. And in that state, the active mind is quietened and the unconscious can come alive. And mediumship was very good and accurate through that method. But it's not necessary. We can see from mediums working on platforms that it's quite a simple process. There's no holotropic breathing needed, although a lot of trance mediums will use these sort of altered states of consciousness. But mesmerism, it showed that within the human body there was a system that could be, for want of a better word, hacked. Just like a computer system can be hacked. And our bodies are these conduits that energy flows through. And technically, your spirit is vibrating all the cells in your body into the very specific order that it's in, which is quite hard to take because sometimes you'd make improvements if you could. But it's all about a vibration. And if we look at life, it's evolved in order of complexity through mineral, vegetable, animal, and we're now at this human stage. And beyond, it's supposed to be the sacred seven. You've got the soul, the spirit, and then the God force. So we're transforming our soul through these different grades into of complexity, and we now reside at this human stage, for whatever it is, where we can be aware not only of the world around us, but the world within us as well, in a way that possibly the other animals don't. You could argue many do, but those are typically the ones that are closest to human beings and are sort of taking on some of our humanity. But mediumship is a demonstration that there's something higher about the human spirit, that it's not just this physical form that we are, but there's this invisible realm that we're a part of. And when I came into spiritualism, I was especially excited to experience physical phenomena. And I was reading about it, and it matched some of the experiences I had as a child. So I was very excited to go to my first séance. And in that séance room, there was all this weird paraphernalia that I didn't understand and didn't like. Toys on the floor, the strange trumpet, and a little cabinet with a thin curtain at the end where the medium sat and was then bound by cable ties into the chair to stop any trickery. I will try avoid my thoughts on that, because many of them seem to get out of them quite easily. But it was one of the criticisms of spiritualism, that the paraphernalia, it evolved over time, but what did it really mean? Trumpets moving around the room and hula hoops and all these things. Where did they come from? How did they get there? In the very early days, we know of the wrappings. And so they seem to come from nowhere, or from walls that people would then investigate and find there was no way the wrap was coming from it. But people decided to sort of start bringing in, they'd mostly be sitting around a dinner table. All the plates and dishes would go away after dinner, and the family would sit down, usually on quite a nice polished table, and they would sit with the spirit, maybe just have a candle in the middle and turn the lights out. And this was a very simple, sacred space. But people would start to notice phenomena happening. And at some point, someone thought they would put a glass down on the table and put some letters around, and the glass would move, spell out names. So if you think about it, they developed a very basic form of technology for the spirit world to use and communicate with. And its correct name is the talking board, but everyone calls it Ouija board. And it's debatable where the name came from. Apparently it came through a séance, but I prefer to think it was just yes in French and German, because if they made a board for the European market, it would have those words on it, and it would look like Ouija, but it just means yes and yes in French and German. But from that came different iterations, and I can't remember what the company was, but they very successfully brought out a board that they sold alongside other board games. And it became more of a parlour game as well as a form of communication. But there had been talking boards going back much further. The Song dynasty in China, 1100 AD, they used a talking board for many years. What was it called? They called it Fuji, like Mount Fuji, strangely enough. And this is part of the paraphernalia of the séance. And you would also have a table which was quite light, and people would use it for table tipping, and it, again, using a code, would spell out different information. All of these things were coming through the energy of the circle and the energy of the medium. So the need for a medium to be present has always been the case. I'll come to that a little bit later, but we also see in the séance room people would leave chalk and little slate boards, because there was a period in spiritualism where if you went to a séance, you were expecting slate writing. This was a very brief period in spiritualist history. And I started sort of trying to look at where these things were coming from and look at the progression of spiritualism over the years. Prior to spiritualism and prior to even mesmerism, the most advanced form of communication was the post office, sending a letter, and this little network would take it around the world. The first one was in Calcutta or Bombay, to send letters back from the East India British Trading Company to Europe. And then post offices started appearing all around England and then across the water in America. And this network of communication was built. And then we discovered electricity and we had the telegraph. And so through electricity you could communicate through invisible forces of light using a code. And so the raps that followed on were very similar to that. It's because the human consciousness was able to understand something to a degree that everyone knew about it. And the Fox sisters knew about the telegraph the same way we know about the space shuttle. I haven't been on one yet, but I kind of get the idea. So it was in the consciousness, and the spirit used that's within us, because it's how we communicate. And we can see the same progression through the telephone and the radio. And if you look at the mediums of the time, you know, the rappings came to an end and people started using different forms of mediumship, including trance and direct voice. That's what the trumpet was for. And although the trumpet could actually be levitated in the room, it somehow amplified the voice that was coming through, a voice that could be recognized by a loved one on Earth. We don't see that kind of form of communication now as often as you would like. Physical mediumship is very rare. Now, some people say it's rare because it requires a particular genetic makeup, but it's also rare because we have so much other mediumship that it's not necessary to still have it, but it's still here the same way we still build our houses out of brick and stone. Technically, we're still in the Stone Age, but all these other ages have come as well. And if you look at the frequency, the Stone Age was about 3.5 million years, and we're still in it. The Industrial Iron Age, or the metalworking age, we can go back about 6,000 years because unfortunately we don't find artifacts older than that because the nature of the metal would degrade. And so we may have had it around for a lot longer, I suspect we have, but the evidence just isn't there. I think the best evidence is signs of metalworking, a foundry 12,000 odd years ago, but that's, from what I was reading, that's debatable. But anyway, we can see the Industrial Revolution, we know when that started, and we can see the progress we've made ever since. And it takes 3 generations for any technology to emerge in the world. And the reason it takes 3 generations, because we take 3 generations to mature. So if you look at the internet, the first iteration of it was in 1969, a project between ARPANET and I think it was Princeton University. And it was specifically the 28th of September 1969. 20 years later, after it had been sort of kept more secretive for national security reasons, it was then allowed to come out into the world, and a gentleman called Tim Berners-Lee gave birth to the World Wide Web. Then if you look 20 years later, we have the birth of the smartphone, and the smartphone got everybody in the world online all at once. You can see most people's Facebook accounts go back to 2009 for that reason. Suddenly the world was online, everyone is on there, and through lockdown I was watching videos from people on YouTube in every single part of the world. There's a YouTuber somewhere with a stick. So we've seen the technology evolve and emerge, but when it came to investigating spiritualism, the Society for Psychical Research used a lot of the current technology they had available to research spiritualism. And we had some very great names like Sir William Crookes, Sir Oliver Lodge. Oh God, there's so many names that you could draw up. Most of them had been very skeptical of spiritualism and were trying to protect the public from frauds. And nearly all of them became spiritualists because the experiences they'd had been so prolific that any evidence they had against it couldn't stand up to it. And a lot of those people published books saying so. And very rarely, but occasionally, you would get an investigator who got beleaguered by spiritualism. It wasn't giving them what they wanted, and they would become quite vocal against it. I wonder how many of those would change their minds today, having seen the wealth of evidence that's come and the nature of spiritualism. It's done no harm and a lot of good. So in our investigations, there's several key moments, and one of them's the skull experiment, where in a circle with very profoundly gifted mediums, that they also applied this very strict test conditions and experimented with many devices. And I'll speak about it now because recently whoever's running their Facebook page has started posting a lot of information, so it's well worth looking up. But there's all these devices. But if we go back to the war between Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison, they were both very serious industrialists and scientists, and both of them believed that they had achieved communication with other worlds. Thomas Edison had coined it the spirit phone. Nikola Tesla was more along the lines that he feels he's picking something up from an extraterrestrial source. It didn't sound very human. And during the skull experiment, apparently they had received some information from Thomas Edison about how to reproduce this spirit phone. And there are also Sir William Crookes. He invented the cathode tube, which gave us the old school televisions that we remember, most of us anyway. And so it was believed that you could actually provide a space for the spirit to manifest in that tube. And whether that actually happened or not, there's some strange photos on the internet. I'm not sure. I don't believe they did. And I don't believe they did on moral grounds, because the idea of trapping a spirit there didn't seem right. There were other methods of doing it in the seance. And when they had developed these ideas, the idea of a spirit phone has been picked up again in more recent years. There's a scientist called Gary Schwartz, who's a doctor, and he put all of his scientific knowledge into the seance room. And a very simple experiment he talks about is a light photon detector. And would place it into the seance room, and they would open up and detect the levels of photons, and they would significantly rise, almost doubling. Then they would repeat the experiment without opening the seance in the woo-woo way that we're thinking, and they would detect a lower volume of light particles. So that's a very simple experiment. It doesn't prove beyond doubt, but it raises some serious questions. Where are these light particles coming from? How are they being detected? And so that's just one form. And he's also been working on the spirit phone. And I think for the last 15 years, every single year I've been reading, it'll be out next year. And one of the problems with it is the guarantee of the spirit phone is that anyone can pick up and have a conversation with the afterlife. And one thing I know as a medium, you can't tell the afterlife what to do. They come when they want to come. I know there's a few mediums who go, well, tell me who you want and I'll get them for you. And I don't think it works that way. And one of the main reasons spiritualism suffered in its early days was the very strong argument from other occultists that what we are communicating with is just the shell of your loved one and not the intelligence. I suspect those people didn't feel that love coming from the spirit world like a medium does. That mother-child love, that father-child, that grandfather, that nemesis love that you have. I know what I'm doing. I know that I'm communicating with that genuine intelligence. And I believe they pick up the shells of their lives to communicate with us, even if they've incarnated again on Earth. That's a strange subject, but one that a lot of hypnotherapists will be able to tell you is probably real, because of the experiences they have with their therapies. And so we've seen this sort of emergence of this need to use technology, and I'm not really into paranormal investigations, but I know people that are, and they'll take along sound recording equipment, and they'll leave it there, and they'll listen back to it later on. And when they listen back, they can hear voices that no one heard at the time. And a friend of mine, he started an urbex channel on YouTube. He liked going into old buildings that have been abandoned, especially along the coast, all the military places that have been left empty. And they go and film going around. They just made sure they did it right and they weren't breaking the law. And my friend had argued with me a lot. We were good friends, but he would pick me up on my spiritualist tendencies and go, oh, well, that's just your opinion. You're biased, aren't you? And I'm like, no, it's the truth. You must understand. And one day he phones me up. He goes, we just did a a sort of urbex around this property, and him and his friend, one had 2 cameras on him, a GoPro and a body cam, and the other one had a body cam. And the next day when they were going through it, on all 3 devices, they picked up a voice in the same room at the same time saying, "It's cold in here." And so it put the scare of God into him. And he phones me up and says, "Do you want to come along and do it?" And normally I wouldn't have anything to do with these, but because it was him and because I wanted to show him it was what it was, I was like, well, first of all, it wasn't bad. He didn't tell you to leave. He was just telling you it's cold in there. And he's like, and then when we went and had a look at the place, he had been an old farmer, and the place had no heating, and he used to use that room to clean and gut all the pigs, and it needed to be cold in there, so he kept it cold in there. He designed it that way for the slaughter of the animals that he produced. And it was a really nice experience. He drew a line under it in his life, and he moved on from that place, and the place got overtaken by nature. It was actually quite hard to find it, so I used dowsing rods, because even my friend who had been there before, it had been a while, and the overgrowth had taken over, so he wasn't even sure which way to go. So he let me guide with the rods, and it actually took us to the place we needed to go, but via some farm equipment he'd missed on his several journeys there before. So we got more of an idea about the person who had lived there. And again, the use of technology, this was all to put onto the internet, to show everyone, these places before they get turned into something else. It's holding on to relics of the past. So he never took any equipment looking for this, but it happened to him anyway. And so had I taken him along to a church, he might not have been very convinced by himself. But after that experience, I think he prays every day and don't talk to me anymore. But it just shows with all these technologies, we can do our own little experiments. Why shouldn't we receive a recording? So I used to do it. I used to leave the tape running myself, but I don't need convincing, so nothing would happen. But for him, it was really important that it did, and it's changed his outlook on life. Right, before I get too lost. So this electronic voice phenomena, there's a lot of people who are engaging with it, and typically as spiritualists we say, all right, prove it, show us your methods. And there's a very interesting lady in Brazil, and she's working with, it's like a little dome thing, and she's leaving this projector running, and they're not seeing anything during the sitting, and she'll have someone there, and she's connecting with them, and they've probably lost a member of the family. You've got to remember, Brazil's far more open to spiritualism than even England is. It's one of the major religions there, and so they have a very open approach. And she just found herself have this phenomena coming to her, and she's a very simple lady. She tries to explain it as well as she can, bearing in mind it's not her native tongue. And she's been told by her spirit people not to quite explain how she works just yet. And we understand that in spiritualism. Many circles stay closed for a long time. And even the circle that gave us silver birch, that was kept very secretive for a long time. And they only published books from it much later on down the line. And so she's having these amazing things where when they look back at it, they can see the face of the loved one in the projection, but they don't see it when it's actually happening. And so a lot of the evidence we can understand. Sometimes we get a message in a church and it's not until the next day we go, oh my God, that's what they were talking about. And so it's a lot of these investigations, the answer doesn't always come when they want it. It comes much later on. And it doesn't always come through the person they want it either. I want to give a couple of examples of advances in technology. The first one is, we all know Alan Sugar, Lord Sugar to the likes of me, and I mean this with the greatest respect, Lord Sugar. He's a very successful businessman, and he invested in hardware. He wasn't interested in anything else. He wanted a guarantee on his earnings, on his money and his investment. And he owns a company called AMS, Alan Michael Sugar Trading, Amstrad for short. And he was building the hardware for computers because he didn't see where the software was going. So he invested in the hardware. and he was very successful and he made a lot of money. Then along comes Bill Gates, and suddenly you realise software was where the real money was. But it doesn't mean he made a mistake. He was sticking to his guns and he was correct, and he made a lot of money. Then along came satellite television, and again he invested in the hardware, the dishes and the decoders. He wasn't interested in the programming because, well, satellite TV was pretty rubbish then anyway, and to him it was too much of a gamble, but the dishes and the decoders was not a gamble. So he made some good money on that, but along came Rupert Murdoch and made billions. Then, I don't know if anyone remembers, he introduced this landline phone that you could text on as well. It was around Christmas '99 or something like that, just as the third generation of mobile phone came out. So everyone suddenly had a mobile phone, even if it was just for emergencies. And well, as good as his phone was, it wasn't as successful because he didn't see the third generation of mobile phone being so ubiquitous. And I think they changed the way they priced the plans as well, so suddenly you could text for free. So it wasn't a failure. I think he probably broke even on it, but it wasn't the success that it probably should have been. And then, now, I can't find it, but I remember being told this, so take it with a pinch of salt. He was also offered the distribution rights for the iPod. And back in the day when we had MP3s, the iPod was new, snazzy, and it was better looking, but it was also quite expensive. So most people stuck with the cheap MP3s from China. And because of that, again, he thought, okay, well, it's hardware, but it might just be a Christmas fad. So he turned down the distribution rights for the iPod, which we know turned into the iPhone and the iPad. At no point can you say he was a failure or he missed a trick. It's just he was convinced to stick with his idea of hardware and not software. And he was right, correct, and made a lot of money. But because he's very mainstream, very rigid and very good in business, he's not a visionary in the same way Steve Jobs was, or in the same way that other people, or Rupert Murdoch, saw where Sky TV was going to go, knew it was going to be this premium service. So the other example I want to give is Jeremy Clarkson. Has anyone watched Clarkson's Farm? Okay, and so he's new to farming. About 10 years ago, he bought this farm, and every 2 years they've brought out a series following his adventure. And he got the right people around him. He got a good farm manager and good help and advice. But then he decided to get some pigs, and the pigs were going to fertilise the fields as he moved them around, and then there was a good revenue. But you know, he, like any farmer, he was distraught when some of the piglets were lost, and the mother had been rolling over onto the piglets. And everyone understands in farming there's an acceptable natural loss. It's going to happen, it's just nature. And being quite new and sensitive to it, he was very upset. And he said, can't we build like a scaffolding ring that goes around the sty, just enough for the piglets to fit under, but still be close to mum? And said, okay, we'll have a go. No one's ever done this before. And they put it in, and it was so successful. Instead of losing 12%, they only lost 6%. That's half. And suddenly, the person who made it up for him patented it, and it's been rolled out everywhere. So all these people, now today, Jeremy Clarkson's loved by the farming community, because not only for the amount of exposure he's given, but he's contributed to it. He saw something that thousands of years of pig farming had missed. Something so simple. It's called Clarkson's Ring. You can look it up. But it just shows that sometimes it's the it's sometimes the outlier. But it's sometimes an outlier that comes in with something new. So it brings me back to spiritualism. You know, we can see where the technology has evolved, and we're now seeing holograms becoming the thing of the future, and virtual augmented reality. So I imagine spirit communication is going to find avenues in that direction. But I don't think it's going to come from spiritualists, because the Fox sisters weren't a spiritualists, and many of the people that advanced spiritualism were not spiritualists. They were actually quite against it. but they were presented with something so life-changing they had to change their mind. And so, I mean, as much as I would love to see it come from within spiritualism, it will probably come from without of it. It will come from somewhere and someone who had no idea that they were about to embark on a strange journey that would find us accepting them as one of us, poor people. But if we go back to all these forms of communication, they exist because they originated through us. We communicate using invisible forces of light, whether we are aware of it or not. So therefore, all forms of communication through invisible forces of light will come from us. And they will follow all our patterns, just like the generational pattern. There's also an exponential pattern. Like I said, the Stone Age took a very long time to get us to the point where we are. And the next stage that followed metalworking was far quicker in frequency. And so the Industrial Revolution compared to the metalworking age, even quicker than the space age, the digital age. And if we chart it out, it would be a chart that very quickly curved off. And we see our spiritual growth as the same. It takes a very long time for us to finally open our minds, and when we do, things come to us at exponential rate. Our technology is growing at an exponential rate, and your spirit develops at an exponential rate. It takes a very long time to get you to open your eyes, but when you do, things move very quickly. So if we can see all these forms of technology as coming through us, then just our bodies and our spirit is a system that can be hacked using, first of all, breathing techniques. So one of the things I learned from one of the better, probably the best teacher that I've had, this lovely lady who taught square breathing. It's just draw in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and do that 4 times. It's never not worked brilliantly for me. Every single time it just clears your energy, and it's a way of hacking the system. So we know that we have a system that can be hacked and utilised to our greater effort. And that brings in, meditation is connectivity and networking. We understand that in our computer science because it originated in our inner science. Activation of our light bodies. I hate that terminology, but I know it's true. Like if people are sitting there deep in meditation and you had one of those photon counters, it would increase significantly. This has been studied all over the world with every type of meditator, and the fact that it's not on the news every day doesn't mean it's not true. And it can be measured using these, and I think some of them are actually quite affordable now. So seances can start introducing these, whereas they cost thousands before. I think you can pick one up for about £150. But it's a recognised tool in science. Then that comes, someone mentioned the chakras earlier, and I used to be very against the talk of chakras because you won't find one in a surgical operation. But the rishis who taught the chakras, again, they found a way of hacking the system. And the chakras fit perfectly in harmony with the science of music, colour, frequency and octaves. And so when we use this, it's a way of hacking the system, of vitalising the body through this method of opening yourself up, looking for areas within yourself that might need a bit of work. And so it's a brilliant system that correlates to the systems of the body and the mind and the soul. And then, of course, there's healing. Mesmerism is very much associated with healing and what's called magnetic passes. And many healers in the early days were very powerful. And there's a lot of stigma about it because in spiritual healing, we see it as different to spiritual healing as to magnetic healing. The idea is that in magnetic healing, you're giving your own energy and depleting your own, and then the energy you're passing to someone else will be limited. Whereas if you're connected to spirit, that is an unlimited source of healing. And I agree with that in principle, but we still have these electromagnetic fields of our body that's being used by the spirit for that healing. And so through mesmerism, we found the reality of these magnetic passes, and through spiritualism, we find the reality of spiritual healing. And the two combine themselves automatically to all healers, I'm sure. But that, again, it's a form of technology. It's a form of, we are biological organisms at such an intricate and complexity that it's hard to describe it as a computer or a piece of tech, because that soul in us makes us know that we're a bit more than that. But that also means that we can utilize that understanding. Psychology understands that there's the left brain, the right brain, and the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. Again, it's a system that can be understood and hacked, for want of a better word. But healing also is a great description of the flow of energy. So if we plug a plug into the socket, we know that there's 240 volts, and it comes through a fixed current of energy through the wire, and then it can be utilized in many different ways. So volts, amps, and then watts. The wattage is, you can use a Hoover, or we can charge up a phone, but it's all coming through the same thing, but it needs a transformer at the end of it to depend on what you want to do with it. So whether someone's giving a reading, a demonstration of spirit art, or if they're giving healing, it's coming from the same source, it's coming through you as a conduit, but what you're doing with it is mutable. So in astrology we have cardinal, fixed and mutable energies. It's coming in, that cardinal force, it's rushing in through the socket. That fixed energy is the sort of current that you've built up around you. If you think the wire that it's coming through has to be fit for purpose, if it's got any nicks in it or problems, the voltage is going to be diminished. It could be dangerous. But when it comes to the spiritual work, we as conduits are only going to be able to open to what our minds can be open to. We have to be that open channel for that energy to come through us. And I suppose when you think of the chakras and that cleansing and the shadow work, it's about making sure when that energy does come through you that you've addressed all the parts of you it's going to flow through, because when it gets there it will magnify it. So if you're suffering with a lot of guilt and loss, it's going to help you overcome it, but you need the right tools to do it. And the lady who talked about AA earlier, when I looked at the 12-step program, I just saw a perfect spiritual unfoldment. To draw a line under all the past mistakes, to maybe where needed make apologies to the people who may or may not accept it, so that you could both move on and forgive yourselves. It's a way of hacking the system. It's a way of hacking your spiritual self to bring it out. And we see all these methods, all these self-help guides that are out there where people have discovered their route to doing it and shared it with other people. So we're going through this transformation. We've gone from, mineral, vegetable, animal to human, and humans are evolving into that soul and that spirit, and then whatever godhood looks like. I think we're quite far off from it, but we're definitely somewhere along that path. And one of the criticisms of spiritualism is that the soul is not immortal, and this Stephen Mayger is not going to be here in 100 years' time. That's been and gone, done with, but my soul may take on another expression. It may not remember its past life, like most of us have come here not remembering how we got here. So we're all fascinated with where we're going, but we didn't even know where we came from in the first place. But knowing that that energy pattern and the birth and rebirth cycle is ingrained into our systems, we can go through this life with all the tools and systems hacked and at our disposal, and we can fill our boots with this wonderful world that we've got around us, knowing that when the time comes, we are just going to move on to another state of being, one where we reflect on the life we've had and where we can communicate back with our loved ones. And as great as that sounds, our loved ones can only tell us about their lives. You know, when we're asking about the future to the past, they can't answer those questions because it's not their world. My grandfather can't tell me where the next piece of technology is going to come from because he has no idea. It's our job to do it. And going back to those MP3 players, well, when I was a little boy in single digits, you'd have to go to the video shop and hire the video player with the videos to watch it for the weekend. And there was a war between VHS and Betamax, wasn't there? And all the VCRs, all the VHSs were already taken out, so you got lumped with Betamax, which eventually he lost. But we got back, and my parents were trying to plug the VCR in, and I can't quite remember what they had wrong, but they couldn't get it working. And me, being about 5 years old, fixed it in a few seconds because I somehow knew what to do with the newfangled remote control. I didn't know how to do it. I was just born with the ability to operate this thing. And I was about 15 years ago talking to my nephew, and I had this MP3 player and I couldn't get it to switch on. I was holding the power button, wouldn't come on. I'd replaced the battery, didn't seem to be working. And he went, "Don't be silly, Uncle Steve, you've got to press the button 5 times, haven't you?" And I'm like, "Well, where does it say that?" "Well, everyone knows that, silly." Something had changed since I was a kid. And he knew this at 4 or 5 years old, and I didn't, because I'm now old to him. And so it just shows that the next generation comes in fully prepared for the technology that's coming. And as we lose our ability to operate the technology, we have to let go of it because it's not our world anymore, it's theirs. And all we can do is guide them in the right way, knowing that they are better than us. They're more prepared for the world that's coming than we ever will be. Our time has been fruitful, but you know, we've got to take part in one of the greatest moments in the history of humanity, and I just hope that our children have the same feeling and the same reverence, because whatever's coming, they're going to be the ones forwarding what's new and what's different that we'll never understand. So I want to sort of finish by reminding us all that despite the problems we have, we can look at ourselves as a hackable piece of technology that will enlighten us and evolve us. Last night I was watching this, was following this page that I'm on Facebook, and it's all about Kundalini energy. And this poor lady, I don't know who her teacher is, but she put an X-ray of her spine. She's got cerebral palsy, and the base of her spine is all folded over. And she's like, "Well, I know that I'm not going to reach enlightenment in this lifetime because I need my spine to be straight for that to happen." And I'm like, it hurt like being punched in the gut myself. Who told you that? Who told Stephen Hawkins he'd be dead in 5 years and he lived another 50? Do you know what I mean? It's like, your physical body is not you. You are the soul and the spirit that for a while resides in that body, can use it and abuse it. There's no need to have a healthy corpse. Do you know? I know that's really bad advice, but yeah. we just have a very, very short time on this planet. In the grand scheme of things, our lives are very short, so we need to make them as fulfilled as possible. And with all the technology we've got at our disposal, I mean, you think the Fox sisters, how impressive it was to put a stamp on a piece of paper and put it in a red box at the end of the road, and to have a response come back from the other side of the world just 2 weeks later. And now we have instant gratification. We video call someone in Australia face to face with very little delay. It's incredible. Apparently the President Nixon spoke to the guys on the moon on Christmas Day, and I'm still trying to get signal with my phone outside. But it just shows that we've been progressing hand in hand with that technology, because we're all progressing. You know, you don't have to have any technology with you, and you will be born more advanced and ready for whatever the current climate is. So the Fox sisters were very humble young girls with, you know, a very marginal education, living in what at the time was quite a sort of reasonable home. But most of us would look at it and go, "Oh God, poor people," and they all slept in the same room, and you know, it was a different time. And we look now at there's that saying, strong men create good times create weak men create bad times, and bad times create strong men and women. Women are always strong. They have to be, because we get weak. But that just shows the cycles will fulfill themselves over and over again. In spiritualism, we go back to these pioneers. Most of them were dead against spiritualism. And after exhausting every possible argument against it, they finally said, okay. Even the Society for Psychical Research, they were quite biased against spiritualism for a while, despite the fact that many spiritualists took part. The science was very biased on both sides. So whenever someone presented their evidence, the weight of opposition was overwhelming. So only the very best science will get past that barrier, and we have 180 years of it. But despite all of that, none of that really matters anymore. We're in the luxurious position where not only have we proven it, and not only is it legal, we could be left to enjoy it unobstructed. There are countries just over the shores in Europe and especially in Asia where we dare not mention we are a spiritualist. It's not accepted all around the world like it is here. So while we're here and while we have this technology, I say fill your boots and enjoy it. Communicate with as many people, like-minded or otherwise, as you can, because one day they might switch it all off, and when they do, we'll suddenly realise that we can still communicate that way. We can still communicate, and I just want to finish on a series of podcasts called the Telepathy Tapes, where a lady, I don't know quite her background, but she was working with children with, mostly they didn't speak, they were called non-speakers of varying degrees. And these children, when they did have these teachers who were very close to them, the teachers would suddenly realise they were being communicated telepathically with this child and mention it to the parents, and the parents would say, yes, but I was too scared to mention anything because I don't want my child being taken off of me because everyone thinks I'm mental. And so it took a while for this to emerge, but this lady found more and more. These children speak about these rooms that they go to where other non-speakers are there, and someone would be allowed to teach them. And they're having this invisible conversation with other people who are on Earth, and they talk about this mound. It's a mound of energy, and someone's allowed to stand on this mound and speak and talk to them, and they would learn from them. And there was divine protection over this mound. Out the mouths of babes, there was this divine protection that only those who were worthy could be stood at this mound and speak, and you had to find your way there. And so even some of the non-speakers who weren't very nice, who felt very bitter about their position, they could never enter into these conversations. They could never go to this mound. It's well worth listening, the Telepathy Tapes. I think there's about 12 episodes. But they were asked, one question they were asked is, so what binds everything? How is it all possible? And they said love, and they said, okay, well, what is love then? And they all gave the exact same answer worldwide. Love is anything that doesn't divide. So, our technology has brought us together. It hasn't divided us. Spiritualism, despite all the arguments that can happen internally, brings us together. It doesn't divide us. In 180 years, it hasn't caused any harm. It's only caused good. And you can look at our technology and point to all the places it's done harm, then you're missing the point. It's done so much good that I used to reject technology. I hate it. I don't like being around too much EMF frequencies, but I wouldn't give it away because it's one of the best things we could have. And when it's gone, and we'd regret it. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Any questions?
Really good. Any questions?
Can I just ask, when we go to the spirit world, how do we find out about our past lives? Is there a way of finding out?
I don't know. I think that's in my experience, and from reading what I have, a lot of they say that someone who is more spiritually advanced will be aware of their past lives when they incarnate. And I think that we're on a big group evolution, and you just have to look how many people are on the planet now compared to a few hundred years ago. There's a heavy investment in human life on Earth at the moment, and we can't quite tell why. But I think with the movement as we see it worldwide, people are engaging in past life study and recall. Now, it was common knowledge 2,000 years ago. If you read the story of Jesus talking to his disciples, and they want to know whether or not he's the Messiah, because in the prophecy, the Messiah is supposed to be preceded by Elijah. Elijah is supposed to return first and make the way for the Messiah. So Jesus was asked, are you the Messiah or are you Elijah coming to clear the way for him? And he said, no, he already came in the form of John the Baptist, and you rejected him like you'll reject me. He didn't correct them and say, no, reincarnation's not real, past lives aren't real, be quiet. He corrected them on the detail but not the principle. So it was just common knowledge that we reincarnate then. They didn't even need to address it. You know, that's why I didn't need a book in the Bible, because it's like everyone just knew, you know, that birth and rebirth. But it was only those who have had more spiritual experience, and I try to avoid that. There are more advanced souls and less advanced souls, but we can see that in people's personalities. There are some people that are very fresh to the world, and some souls that seem to have been here for a long time. They're very bitter as well. I think that at this, we're all starting to investigate that more now. I've had loads and loads of past life experiences in my life, but I can't prove them. So spiritualist churches has been a place you couldn't really talk about it. Now that the science has been done, you've got the University of Virginia, about 8 years ago, they released a 50-year study into reincarnation. So then you marry that up with the ancient texts. Now, it says in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, exactly 49 days from death to taking on the incarnation in a new womb. I'm not sure about that. That's not my experience. My experience is that your loved ones are still attached to you through love for as long as it takes for them to move on and let go of that connection. I don't think it's unhealthy, you know, but if you were so close to someone and they wait for you to come over before they can let go of their earthly attachment, you know, because if you say that to a Buddhist, they go, oh, earthly attachment's no good. Well, it's a loving one, you know, so the jury's out whether it's this way or that way. But I think more people are starting to use hypnotherapy to go through their past lives. I read the books by Dolores Cannon, mostly around They Walk with Jesus and Jesus and the Essenes. I kind of bailed out when she started getting into the alien agenda. I just don't want to go down that route. But through reading that, you get a perspective that there is no time or space, that it felt like she was genuinely having a conversation with someone 2,000 years in the past. And so even though we've got this idea about a line of past lives, I don't think we're prepared for the bigger picture that goes with it to understand it. So are we having the dreams of a guide, and we're mistaking them for our own past lives? Are we picking up on someone else's? You know, we don't have the ability to understand it quite as we do with mediumship, because it's still emerging. But I do honestly think that all of us, in our dreams, we have these memories that aren't our own, and some of them are probably the past lives. I know that in past life studies, a lot of people who have had immediate reincarnations, young children who can remember their name, rank and serial number of the person they were when they died. One young man, only about 9 years old, he knew the name, the plane and the exact location where his plane went down in a Japanese harbour, and his parents took him out there and they found it. Even the dredgers in the harbour didn't discover it. So it's like that child is proof that one mind can remember their life and the next, but beyond that, I think it gets a bit cloudy and sketchy. But I've had some incredible experiences where I'll just know I've been there before.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Perhaps it's children who remember better because they're so near to the
Yeah,
previous
yeah.
life. But as we get older, we lose.
Yeah. Was that? I don't know. Unfortunately, it was Russell Brand, but he said this amazing thing. He was waiting outside of school for the kids to come out, and this child ran past him. There's a little girl, and she ran over to a pram with a baby in it, and she went, "Oh, can you tell me what heaven's like? Because I'm starting to forget." You know, out of the mouths of children, isn't it? Yeah.
Stephen, could I ask, do you think that where you mentioned in your talk about technology possibly finding spirit connections outside of spiritualism through some sort of invention, do you think it might be found by accident through something like these brain chips that Brian Johnson and Elon Musk are
Well.
developing, because they're going to be in individuals that,
Yeah.
where the AI could be almost influenced by the individual?
I think the fears around that are dismissing how amazing the human spirit really is, because AI can only grow. It can become more clever than the waking mind, but I don't think if something creates something else, that thing can't overtake its creator. That's like the arrogance of Nietzsche saying God is dead and we killed him. You know, clearly that wasn't true. The world carried on, but it was an idea that we've dismissed the possibility. I think AI, if it is an implant in the mind, I mean, people hated the post box when it was first brought into the village. All right, I'll tell this story. I read it in a paper somewhere. It was this old lady who lived in this house near the post office, and she was adamant they could not close the post office. They're not taking that post box away. That's been there 200 years. But 200 years previously, when it had been installed, the same lady who lived in the same house, well, a different lady, but the same nature of her, was demanding that Lucifer not come to town. It was the devil who was going to bring problems. Outsiders are going to come and use and abuse it. But the same character, the same personality, in the same home 200 years later is fighting to keep it. And I think spiritualism, I imagine when the telephone and the radio and the TV were invented, they thought it was going to be the end of the churches. And you could say the same about the internet now. Everyone can do these online circles, Zoom, but we're all still here in the flesh. You know, it's like the Stone Age is still here. The churches are still here. And somehow it will integrate. You can still go to the cinema. If you get into a car and turn the radio on, it's the same DJs playing the same music. It didn't go anywhere. The only thing that's changed are the prizes. Have you heard the radio lately? It's like £100,000 prize in a day. And that's because so many people are listening to the radio. They can do these competitions. And like I said, the cinema's still open, even though we've all got Netflix, Amazon Prime, and somehow it's going to just integrate and life will carry on. We'll still have a physical existence, and we'll wonder what we were worried about, you know. I mean, I used to be quite anti-5G and everything, but then I thought, well, we managed with 3G and 4G, and I'm relatively healthy. Again, we only get 70 plus years, so, you know, just fill your boots and enjoy it. And when it does come, all our worst fears will be just that. You know, everyone was petrified of the technology as it came along. My friend's from Bulgaria, and he said he was laughing because I was having a similar conversation. And about 15 years ago, their grandmother, who had always lived in the same house, she'd gone into hospital for a few days and she had an operation. So all the sons got together and got an electrician and put lights in her house, an electric cooker, stuff. She'd been adamant, no, I'm happy with my fire. Do not do that to my house. I don't want Lucifer in town. And they thought they were doing her a favour. When she got back and they turned the lights on, she went, oh, I'm ready to go now. Right, so it was like, it was this, oh, I'm scared of it, I don't like it, I don't want it. But I think AI is going to be just the same. It's somehow, I don't really want a chip in my brain. and I certainly don't want to have one, otherwise I can't do this, that or the other. But I think our fears are just that, and they're easily dismissed once it gets here. And again, it's the Fox sisters could not conceive of a smartphone, and even when I was sort of playing on my Game Boy, I didn't realise, I couldn't have dreamed how it was going to turn into a phone. And if you look at Star Trek or any of these science fiction films where they were trying to envisage the future, none of them had a smartphone. You know, it's like it was unexpected. You know, even Alan Sugar didn't see it coming. So, yeah.
I do get a bit worried when I walk into a room and everyone is on a mobile phone and no one's talking to one another.
Just go over and turn the router on and off without anyone knowing.
Yeah, that's always a good one.
Can I just ask something? I don't know if it's relevant. So, I had a medium say here in the back about a robin, and I didn't know what she was on about. And then just the other day, so I don't know if it's a spiritual experience or what, but just the other day, it was on the fence outside and the wind had stopped. Then I moved forward a bit with my shopping because I was struggling with it. And it jumped to the next fence, then the next fence, then it went on the floor in front of me, right? And then I went to get something out of my bag to give it, like some nuts or something. And it then just flew, but instead of flying away, it literally flew so close to my ear that I could hear its wings, and even still now, I can hear its wings. And I automatically remembered what that lady had said about it being my granddad, and I took that on board. I've even got a photo of it on my phone, and I don't know, you know, it's hard for me to know if that was. I believe there was my granddad.
Well, I mean, I would have dismissed that years ago,
Yeah.
right? But I've seen it so many times, especially with a robin and a granddad. I don't know why, but grandfathers love to use. And I would have easily dismissed it, but I can't because I've seen it too many times.
Yeah.
And it's like the white feather, you know.
Yeah, I've
it's like
seen that
I've
all.
found a white feather and I've literally taken my jacket off and just checked everywhere. This isn't down. Where's that? And it can't have been from the pillows. There's no way that feather could have got in there. But I still don't want to accept it.
I got one in a closed garage
Yeah.
when I got my garage.
And it's just happened so many times that now I'm like, okay, you know, I'm not going to grab every single white feather and keep it forever. But I would have dismissed it years ago. But I've had too many experiences that tell me that that's not a coincidence.
Yeah.
And the robin as well. It just seems to be the most perfect thing. It's always a grandfather or grandmother. You know what I mean? Someone very close.
Yeah, I just thought it was good because, like he said about that, I wasn't looking for it, I forgot about it, and then that happened. And acceptance, you know, I've got a massive thing for acceptance at the moment, so yeah, I just thought I'd share that again.
Thank you. Right, we're going to have 5 minutes. Stephen, thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Stephen.
That
Thanks,
was
Stephen.
really good. Really good. And then we're going to finish off the day with Mark. Yay! Oh, hello.
Getting the board out.
That was brilliant. Well done. No, thank you. It was bloody excellent. Thank you.
Sure. Oh, well, I'll just keep following.
Keep following me just in case.